All right guys, Nick and I are out crappie fishing today, and we both just hopped in the hub house, and I'm just gonna run you guys through my 4 top crappie baits that should cover you head to toe on crappies through the ice, and we're gonna show you guys what they look like underwater. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I'm gonna start off with the most finesse, and that is just your simple tungsten and a plastic. This is just a little VMC tungsten. I'll show you guys. It's a really simple setup. All it is a plastic threaded on a little jig head. And this is actually a little combination that comes together. And it's really, really subtle for when these crappies are in a less eager mood to bite. And I'm just gonna work that through the water column really, really slow and entice them into biting. And the key to that is having a little tail that has just a little bit of action even when you're not moving your bait. And that tail always seems to be going down there even when you don't think you're jigging it. So that's pretty simple setup for pretty much when I can't get away with using something a little bit more aggressive. Going into, I would say, the second bait is just a little tiny spoon. And I think this is just a little clam spoon, but a bunch of different companies make spoons. And this is a pretty simple little deal. You're just doing little short jigs, and this moves a little bit more through the water column, more than the tungsten and plastic, but still just really simple. And I'm almost always going to tip this with something, just a little bit of meat. I have tipped it with plastics before, but just a little something on those trebles, because they're probably just going to come up and nip this thing, especially when they're a little less eager to bite, similar to plastic. They're not super aggressive. They're not coming in and pounding it. So just tipping that with a little something just to entice them into biting. Works really, really well. So we are going to go into the next one, which is a little tiny rattling bait. And I really like this. The next 2 baits on the more aggressive side, you're able to cover a little bit more of the water. Obviously, with your hole, you're not able to move this thing horizontally through the water column, but you are able to, with these more aggressive baits, you're able to cover a little bit more water because they jump from side to side, and that's exactly what this little rattling bait does. Also, noise is a big deal. If I'm trying to call in fish, these schools of crappies are always kind of moving around, and it's hard to stay on top of them, but if I can call them in with a little bit more aggressive bait and get them to come into me, that's super, super important. And so this little rattling bait, as you can see in the underwaters, moves around from side to side, and you can definitely hear it. It makes a lot of noise down there. Going into the 4th and final bait, this is probably my most favorite one to catch them on, and this is just a little Jigging Wrap. This is the smallest Jigging Wrap they make. And this thing dances through the water column a lot. As you can see in the underwaters, it's shooting from side to side. And like I said before, trying to call in crappies, this thing does an excellent job of it. If they're on the outskirts of my cone angle, but I can see them kind of in the vicinity, this is what I'm going to pick up because I can dance it from side to side and call them in. And so this one is super fun. This is probably when the crappies are most aggressive and they want to come in and pound it. This is what I'm going to pick up. I have had it before where they want to eat this and not a jig in a plastic. You'd think if they're going to eat this, they're probably going to eat a jig in a plastic, but I've been on lakes before and on bites before where this is the only thing they'll eat. And so if there was 2 baits that I would always have tied on, typically I'm not going to go out with 4 rods and have one of these tied on each rod. I'm going to go out with 1 or 2 rods. I'm going to have this one, the most aggressive, and a tungsten of plastic, the least aggressive, and I'm going to carry those 2 rods around with me and see where the day takes me. Sometimes they're going to want one over the other. Sometimes they won't really care. But those are my 4 baits that I'm going to have tied on year round pretty much. There's variations of these baits. You don't necessarily need just this bait. A lot of different companies make these styles of baits, but these are the 4, I would say, different kinds of baits that I always use for crappies. I really don't go outside of the spectrum a whole lot, and I don't think you necessarily need to either, especially if you're on a budget like me or anything. So these are my 4 baits. As you can see in the underwaters, it pretty much covers everything you need. So I think Nick and I are going to go out and try to catch a couple more, but hopefully this helped you guys in figuring out some of the crappie baits that you might want to try out.